Hello, hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to some of you. Welcome back. Let's just give another minute before we get started to have everybody join in and relax with a cup of coffee, water, or snacks. I'm hoping that everybody had a great morning so far. So far, right, the session has been wonderful, at least to me. You never thought that MT is still in hot topics, right? Where Andrew talked about how to automate MT pricing and payment models, or the adaptation or the adapting the new machine translation at the speed of lights. Not quite there yet, but at a cheetah level, so it's pretty awesome, right? And also, what also had Mitchell and Gable talk about the very insightful use cases about the translation workflow. And most importantly, John mentioned about at a distance, it's about PE, post editor, and then also to streamline the quality versus speed using the price model. So something that we can think about for our day-to-day basis, especially working with vendors and clients. All right, guys, enough with me talking. Thank you so much for joining the call, and thank you again for the Gala to host this conference. Before we get started, a quick note. Again, everybody's muted and video is off. Any question about Zoom, please use the Gala apps or the chat, and the Gala member will assist you. And of course, lastly, during the presentations, if you have any questions, please feel free to type your question in the Q&A panels. Your question will help the speaker to know what you're thinking, what you're bothering you, and things like that, so that they can answer swiftly. So let's get started, guys. I'm James. I'll be your next 3 session moderators. I'm delighted and ecstatic to welcome our next topics, which is to program or not to program. How Middleware opened up the industry, and I welcome to our speaker, Istvan Langell. Istvan wears 2 hats. He is the founder of The Lazy, the company that makes continuous localization efficient across the entire supply chain. He's also worked as a technology consultant for Lindsay Insight. Previously, he was one of the founders of Kilgrave, the maker of MemoQ, and held various positions in the company. He tried most roles in the industry as a translator, a director, a consultant for several corporate translation buyers and institutions. He holds several degrees, including PhD for translation study at the ELTE, University of Budapest. He's passionate about technology and has big interest in contributing to what he called the intelligent translation industry. And Istvan, wonderful you have here, for you to talk about Middleware. So please go ahead and join the call. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James. Like first blooper, I started not on the first side. So this is a presentation that is kind of a logical follow-up to what Henrik Kuhneman was presenting yesterday. And basically, I will talk about very specific tools that you can use to quickly get started with automation. Automation seems to be a hot topic in this industry these days. And therefore, I think it's like any practical advice I can give is probably very useful for you. So we talked about middleware opening up the translation industry. But in reality, are we going to talk about middleware or integration and automation platforms? We are going to look at the solutions, both the general ones and the industry-specific ones, and also have a bit of an understanding of how they fit with your existing technology, because of course you need to automate what you've got rather than have something completely new for automation. And I'll give you a couple of ideas for implementation. If you've got any good case studies or any good ideas, then please don't hesitate to share. So when I say middleware, in the real sense of this word, it is generally used in software development only. It's a messaging between the operating system and the application. So middleware is not what I'm going to talk about if I take the definition to its strictest sense. On the other hand, where the word middleware comes from into this industry is that this is the word that Clay Tablet started using back like 10 years ago or even more. It is something that is taking different systems and putting their output into one form. And we have had a lot of the content management system integrations, and some other integrations as well, as you will see. But in reality, these are not called middleware. In reality, these are called integration platforms or automation platforms. But because in this industry, Clay Tablet, Xilio, Kaleidoscope, Intento all call themselves middleware, I think I will just go with this terminology. And this was just a real quick detour in order to discuss the terminology. So I'm going to talk about integration platforms when I talk about middleware. Today is the world of platforms. So we live in an age when you might have heard API first, which means that tools are not optimizing for the interface, they are not optimizing for the user experience of users, but they are optimizing for the developer's experience. They are trying to be sometimes adding value by remaining invisible. And there are some API first tools, but the integration platforms I'm talking about, they cannot be API first. They are API focused tools, given that they are giving you ways to handle this in a very efficient way. There's another thing I need to mention, that from a legal perspective, reverse engineering for interoperability is legal. So reverse engineering generally, in order to get money by trying to imitate the functionality of another tool, trying to understand how they do something, that is illegal. But when it comes to making sure that one system can work with another, which is called interoperability, basically data exchange and things like that, that is legal to do. So even if the system doesn't have a way of offering APIs, it still is legal to work with that together. So let's talk a bit about the general integration solutions. I guess that many of you must have heard about Zapier, which is the best known example for business usage. And it's also a pretty decent tool. But this is not the only tool that's there in order to support you with your integration efforts. There are some others like Integromat, which is something that I've got experience with, Automate.io, Microsoft Flow, or IFTTT. These do pretty much the same thing, just like a CAT tool does pretty much the same thing. But when you start to use it, then you realize that it's not completely the same. And they differ in a couple of things, such as complexity. Certain tools can actually do full workflow automations. Others are doing like very simple things, if this, then that. Some of them have like very good error handling. Others don't really have such great error handling, and you don't necessarily know where the error is coming from. The scope of the tools supported. So this is something that when you go to their website, you will see like what are the applications that they integrate with. One interesting thing is that Integromat has taken an unusual stance to this, because what it does is that it integrates with Zapier and IFTTT. So if you're using those tools like Zapier and IFTTT for their coverage of certain apps, certain tools, you can still use Integromat in order to orchestrate everything else. The integration functionality. What is the scope of functionality? For example, with Facebook, in one tool, you are able to post. In another tool, you're only able to monitor posts. What are the authentication methods supported? This is really very important, especially in this industry. Are you able to authenticate with a username and password, or are you able to authenticate only with an API key? Are you able to get that API key from your customers if you want to integrate with your customers? And finally, error handling. The integration solutions take care of many error handling aspects. And this is why they always have an interface and they are never fully API based. And here I would like to ask you a question. Like, many of you are managers. And as managers, what percentage of your work goes on exception handling, goes on error handling, goes on things that are out of the ordinary, goes on outliers, if you like? Please share this in the chat. I would be interested in knowing.
So Shavan, some said about 5%, 10%, 20%, to even 40 to 50%.
It's actually lower than I thought.
Okay. What does that mean? Like, could you share your thoughts about some of those numbers?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you have the people to outsource your work to, or to delegate your work to, sorry, then most likely what you're meeting is not the regular jobs, but rather you're doing those things where you need a decision to be taken, where you have a new kind of scenario that you need to analyze and understand. And how it relates to integration and automation is that in most cases, and in every kind of software development, you need to be prepared that more than half of the work is not the actual integration. It is handling all those things that are out of the ordinary. And in certain cases, it can even be 80%. So basically, what you do is you delegate your work to an integration solution, but you always need to be prepared to handle the outliers, handle the things that you haven't handled before. And these integration solutions actually take good care of this. So this is how they speed up your work as opposed to programming something or outsourcing something to a programmer. Because with programmers, it can be like 70 to 80 to 90% of the work is exception handling. With this, it's down to like 20, 40 or something like that. And now I would like to give you a couple of examples from the industry. The first one is Jira. And maybe some of you are working for Lionbridge. And what Lionbridge uses in order to handle their Google work is a Lionbridge Jira dashboard. They have the Jira server, and they are giving you the job through this. One thing you can do is go into Jira all the time and keep a record somehow, export the integration information or copy it out into some kind of a tool, which is usually your business management system. But what we can do with a tool like this is integrating it, for example, into a Google Sheet, which is collaborative, and for small jobs, it may just be enough. If you want to achieve a result like this, what you can do is that you can use Zapier. I tested Zapier and I tested Integromat, and Zapier performed the basic Jira authentication, so you could actually use username and password, whereas Integromat would have only used tokens, which I couldn't get. So if you've got a user in Lionbridge's Jira, you can use Zapier in order to log in there, and then use their Zapier integration in order to create an entry every time an issue is assigned to you. When it comes to the exception handling, you need to have a good understanding of the issue types, because you will find that, for example, there are some issues that are packages which just refer to other issues rather than really work. There are translation tasks, LQE tasks. Are you putting them into the same format in Google Sheets, or are you putting them differently? And as a matter of fact, once you have integrated it into Google Sheets, you can create another ZAP, which is what Zapier talks about, to reassign translators, reassign tickets to individuals, or update the Jira task if, for example, the translator has indicated that they delivered in the Google Sheet. So there are ways to do this. This is just a screenshot, like how you can connect and what it looks like. So basically here we are using in the Jira software server. We have authenticated already, and we are monitoring every new issue. So whenever a new issue appears, then we are going to create a new line in Google Sheets. Because this is a 20-minute presentation, I'm afraid I don't have the time to go into details and show you how it is done. That would have been the difference between the 20 and the 40-minute presentation. Another example. You've got a customer who wants to translate their Facebook or Twitter posts. Again, I have used Zapier in order to set up this hypothetical scenario, because Integromat was not able to post on Facebook. It was only able to watch the new posts. What you need is monitor one post where your customer is sending information, and post using another user. So these are two Zaps. First of all, you monitor, you export the post link, image, text into a Google Sheet to make sure that the translator has the place to translate. You send an email to the translator to get started with the translations. And then if you translate in the Google Sheet, you monitor if the translation is entered into the Google Sheet and post the translation using a different account of Facebook when, for example, this translation is indicated to be final somehow. This is something that Zapier can quite easily do. I mean, we're talking about a setup time of hours rather than days. I mean, the first thing you will get right in half an hour, but then it takes longer until you identify what are the difficulties, what are those things that don't work as expected, and you're going to reach a good working solution in a number of hours. What about the industry? If you look at the NIMSI Technology Atlas, there is a new category which is called integrators. And these are the content middleware. We have two things under this. One is called middleware and the other is called MT aggregators. And under middleware, you see that the majority of these systems are actually connecting content management systems into something, which may be topic, it may be Belazy, it may be a folder structure as well. There are some others, like Kaleidoscope is able to take the content directly into SDL tools. CloudWords is offering more than just the content connection. And with Belazy, we offer vendor portal and translation management system into business management systems such as XTRF and Plunet and the Protemos and others. And there are also the MT aggregators, which I think the most well-known one here is Intento, which is taking different machine translation engines and channeling it as if it was like one single machine translation engine. But there are some other tools that have a strong API-based approach that can be used for automation, such as LexiQA or ModelFront, which are in a different category, and they are related to quality assurance. So in the content middleware, quality assurance is not there. From our industry, the left one is from Zapier. So Zapier has an integration with SmartCat. And if you use SmartCat, you can actually use Zapier in order to connect to a limited amount of scenarios, I can say. But for example, you can send an email to your customer automatically when the project was completed in SmartCat. The right one is an interface from Integromat, which is, for example, where we have created some apps for Belazy. So if you want to set up, for example, a Google Sheet for all the projects that come from your, I don't know, Moravia Symphony or vLocalized Junction or a TMS like SmartLink, you can just create a new record and it will appear in a Google Sheet. How can you use this? You may use the integration platforms in a standalone way or integrate it into other translation management tools. For example, you can use content management system integrations, such as, let's say, iLangel, put into hot folders, but you can also use Intento with its MemoQ or Studio plugin, or Belazy with its XTRF, Plunet, or Protemos plugins. You may also use these with other integration platforms, such as Zapier or Integromat. Or if the tool has a strong API, especially if it is a REST API, you can always connect it yourself to the integration platforms. So even if there is no application available for something like Zapier or Integromat or Microsoft Flow, you can still create certain functionalities. You can create your own application, use the REST APIs that the tool exhibits, and you can use such a system to connect in a very efficient way. So I just put a couple of possible scenarios up here. So the first one is, for example, a structured email. This is something that came up yesterday with Henrik's presentation. That when there is a structured email where you are able to extract data from using regular expressions or other ways, you can extract that information and get that set up in your business management system. There is one way to do it. It's like, for example, through the Belazy connector, you're able to push it into PlueNet or XTRF or anything. This functionality is sometimes also available in business management systems. So it's not necessary that you do it via integration. You may have that as a module of a system, but you can also do it via integration. Next thing is, when the Facebook post is published, bring the translation into SmartCat and get it done there. Again, you can use Zapier to do this. The new content comes in through a content management system, content management aggregator, such as Xilio, iLangel, or Bbox. One of the difficulties is, where does it land? It can actually be used to land in a business management system or in a translation management system like SmartCat. You can do the combination, but one thing that can also happen is that you can use these integrations in order to get the content, translate that, and push it back in an automated manner. Or when your customer places a file on SharePoint, Dropbox, Box, Google Drive, and others, you can also use these integration platforms. And this is, for example, a typical scenario where using Zapier is probably much cheaper than anything else in the industry if they charge for a connector for this. Like you download the new file and you create a project in your business management system. And when you're ready, you just upload it to the right place. All of these tools have integrations with these systems. So there are some mysteries as well. For example, I haven't found an easy way to enter my LinkedIn messages into my CRM. I use LinkedIn a lot for talking to people. And while the CRMs are perfectly integrating with my email, I couldn't find a way to push that into LinkedIn through an automation platform. So I'm just trying to say that the automation platforms are not necessarily solving everything. Yet there are APIs, so I could probably make it happen because LinkedIn has the APIs. It's also not a trivial thing to create a purchase order in an e-procurement system. This is more for the enterprise customers listening to this presentation. That, for example, you've got a project and you want to monitor that project, or you've got a form that your people are, that your colleagues are filling in order to order something from you. And if you need to outsource that, you could push that directly into your e-procurement system, such as Coupa software or something like that. The same time that you create a translation project. This is very doable. And there's also so far no middleware to create translation management system projects. But if there is a need for automation, we are happy to go that way. So there's another mystery. Why doesn't everybody use middleware? And the floor is yours to answer that. Thank you. Get in touch, follow us, please. And I promise to give you useful content if you're interested in automation.
Oh, thank you so much, Stefan. Thank you. Great presentations. I think this is wonderful to know that there are other, aggregator middleware platform out there that support between two and multiple players out there. I got a few questions that audience posed, and the first question is that do you see in the near future middleware or platform, would there be any more additional, or would there be any more integration between a big player out there and a small player? Or do you think that the big platform out there will continue to develop their own plugin in-house? What's your assessment?
I'm not sure I completely understand the question. I mean, for us, like what we do professionally at BeLazy is we are trying to make sure that there is integration across the supply chain. Because if there are small jobs, and this is the reality that people are, the corporates want to push the content quickly. There are small jobs and continuous localization stops at the first MLV that they are working with. That's not continuous localization. So what we think is that the small players need to be taken into account when it comes to automation possibilities, because otherwise, well, sorry to say, everybody's screwed.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Thank you. Another question is that API first and API ready are great. What about interoperability? Like, for example, right, Topics is trying to address this for, support the API for all integration effort. What is your assessment of the state of openness and interoperability with some of the solutions you talk about today?
What I think is that integration, interoperability, and standardization go somehow hand in hand. So I like to talk about these as one umbrella topic. And the reason is that there is something which people forget. And that is that different systems serve different purposes for different people. And so the underlying concepts may be different. And this is something that's happening a lot of times. And, you know, interoperability can only be possible to a certain extent. And what I think is that it needs to be possible, but otherwise it could be preventing innovation, which is another priority. If you give too much interoperability, then innovation dies because the other tools or the other systems that you want to work with, they don't support all that functionality that you need to support in your data. So this is, for example, when it comes to interoperability, yes, we have had a long time XLIF, we have had TMX and everything. But for example, when it comes to XLIF, it's only been recent that, for example, the quality checks that you need to perform or the instructions also go. And I think it's always like interoperability and standardization always must be one step behind the state of the art. And the question is that sufficient? And I think that for many users it is, but it's a matter of the users rather than the matter of the technology very often.
That makes sense, that makes sense. In that case, do you think that if a client would offer, and of course I most likely will say yes, if a client will offer that, hey, I would like to pay you guys to support additional plugin or middleware, would that be the case? Would that be the yes in your case?
Absolutely. I mean, for us, what matters is very much like having working business models. So of course you need a certain, like in order to make automation work, you need several players usually. But once you have that and it is able to work, I think that there is nothing preventing people. So in reality, I think that with the exception of the very, very niche technologies that nobody is really using, I think that there is an interest, and in the entire industry, there is an interest to make things work. I mean, the reason why I chose this as a topic is that I think this year is very much about raising awareness about the possibilities of automation that the cloud has brought, that the web-based technologies have brought. I mean, this was not possible without this development earlier, the same way as it is today. But there's total automation is possible today in many, many workflows, but it's not being done.
Yeah. Can I complete with you more? That's awesome. That's a great answer right there. One question from Constantine is that, why do you think the translation industry did not buy in strongly in middleware?
I mean, my personal, so there are, I was talking about the general middleware solutions, and I was talking about the translation industry specific middleware solutions. And I think that one of the difficulties with middleware that I've seen before is that, okay, there is an aggregation on one side, but where does it go in? Where does it plug in? This is something that I haven't seen resolve this. Like I've talked to some middleware providers who do like content management system integration. And they were like, well, the customer needs to do the other side. And I believe that that is kind of a bit of a turnoff. Like you are very excited about the content management integrations. And then you go to your TMS provider and you ask them like, do you have integration for this and that system? I think that this is the reason. But nice. That's my personal opinion.
I think from a client's point of view, right, we do ask a lot from vendors or tech vendors on, hey, do you support this or do you support that? But in all, you know, we should have a foundation where, you know, we can work together to solve certain problem that we're trying to solve together as a partnership. Yeah, so I agree with that as well. I think as of now, there is no more questions. Any last feedback from you, Istvan?
Well, I'm really glad that you listened through this entire presentation. That's my last feedback. Thank you.